Hi, it's Cynthia Henry. It's another journal entry that I wanted to put out here. This is a little personal and a little difficult, but I want to talk a little bit about it because I think it's really important. Um, about a year ago, I received a call from my brother, and he said that he was contacted by detectives about my father. And this was complete news to me. This was all new. But he said that my dad was being investigated for a potential missing persons case of a young man, Reed Jepson. They were wondering if he might have murdered him. It's a big one. More to that was also that my whole life that he had been committing sex crimes against adolescent young men. My dad is a prominent member of a community. He's a physician, a surgeon. Um, and I've always seen him as the doctor, the one who helps, the one who saves lives, the one who I would watch take people in his car to the hospital because they had broken bones, or try to save a heart attack victim when my neighbor had a heart attack. So the idea that he might have, killed someone, but even knowing the thing that we learned at that time is that he also had a long history of molesting. And that was hugely shocking for my whole family, and we're still reeling and still trying to deal with this. And I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to document my process, my experience about this. Because I tried to find information. I tried to find ways of connecting with other people who might have experienced something like this. And there's nothing. There's nothing. Nobody talks about this if they've had a family member who's been accused. I think like Jeffrey Dahmer's family spoke or something when they are interviewed publicly, but no one really talks about the experience of this and what happens when your world is rocked by police coming in and saying, by the way, we think, or we learned. One of the things that they shared was a letter from one of his victims. And that was so incredibly hard to read, especially being who I am as a therapist and a trauma expert and specializing in people who have been victims of sex crimes. To then learn that my dad has been committing sex crimes and did this in his position, abusing his position as a surgeon, and abusing his role in the community. I think there were things that came up around the Boy Scouts, there were things that came up around him as a doctor, and also maybe with some certain family members, like fondling. It was limited to fondling, masturbating, I think. Not to minimize it, because it's still is hugely shocking and has a huge impact on his victims, especially considering it was in a Mormon community, a very conservative, closed community that's huge. That being a huge issue, I think him being accused of potentially killing someone is also this really reeling thing. It left my family even more disjointed, I think. We all kind of felt, I think, a need to step away, to step back. I think we all distanced from the people in our lives. I think it affected all of our marriages. Raised so many questions about who we are, who he is, but who we are. What does that mean if our dad committed murder? Who does that make us? What kind of people are we? I found out that the family of the boy of Reed Jepson, of Reed, I should say, thinks that we knew all along. I want to tell them, if they ever watch this, that we never knew. We never even had an idea. It was horribly shocking for all of us. I think that we found out in May or June of last year of 2012. That was the first we really knew. I think some of my siblings had heard rumors about potential sex crimes, but all of us would, like, my dad wouldn't do that. That's ridiculous. So learning that, yes, he did, was horribly shocking. But then in the same breath, we also learned that he was being investigated very seriously for many years for this potential disappearance. And what do you do with that? How do you reach out? Who do you talk to? There's no books that tell you how to handle this. There's nothing. There's not even people like me doing a blog on it. There's nothing. There was one book I read. I have to take that back. By Melissa, I can't remember her name right off the bat, but she was the daughter of the Happy Face Killer. And I'm so glad that she wrote that book. It was interesting because I related to so many things that she had talked about. I think the difference is that my dad wasn't a violent man in the same way that other men who are murderers have been with their families. You know, often you hear about a lot of domestic violence and a lot of physical abuse and stuff. He wasn't that person. He did have a temper. So I think I got the brunt of that temper, being the youngest. He had a lack of tolerance for me, got frustrated easily with me. Usually the violence was limited to slapping, and sometimes, name calling. There was one incident that was kind of scary, but it wasn't to the extent of like being bruised and whipped and, broken bones and things that I've heard from other people who had parents who were homicidal. So I felt that maybe putting some of this out there might help other people who have a similar thing. They can just see my process. Maybe they can contact me with their process. It's especially a big deal because he was such a prominent member of the community at the time that we were in Salt Lake. I think that was one of the problems with his victims, is that nobody felt they could come forward because they didn't feel that they would be believed because he was such a prominent member of the community. He was a member of the priesthood in the Mormon church. He was a surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon. He was involved with the universities. It was a big deal. So I can understand why his victims felt that they couldn't say anything or do anything. And I always felt so bad for them, and the impact that it had. I felt helpless. I wanted to do something. And what do you do? Who do you go to? I didn't know, should I reach out to his victims? Should I not? I wanted to. I felt like maybe, did they deserve some sort of restitution? I don't know. I can't do it. I can do a video blog. I can say something, and maybe they can get this information. I guess anybody who needs to know could see it. It's been really heartbreaking. It's been really confusing. I understand that people who, like, I don't live there, but there's people who still, my family who do, and that this really especially hard for them because of all the gossip that happens. I'm going to keep talking about it in this video blog, but at least to his victims, I want you to know how sorry I am that he did that to you. It's horrible, and I hope that you've gotten some support and some help. There are people like me out there who help trauma survivors, who help victims of sexual abuse. Being males is especially hard because males aren't supposed to be victims of sexual abuse, or if you are, then you need to be quiet and not say anything, or there's a huge fear that, you know, they call it like the vampire syndrome, once bitten, that you're going to then become one, or that you're gay, and none of those are necessarily true. Just because you were sexually abused doesn't mean you're going to abuse. It doesn't mean you're gay. If you are gay, it's not because you were sexually abused. It's just not true. And so at least maybe I can put some of that out there for the guys who were abused by him. For the Jepson family, oh my God, I am so sorry. I even tried to work with the police, which was its own mess. They told me half-truths. They made things kind of gruesome, horrible, that weren't true. So it was even more traumatizing, to be honest with you, for me. But certainly, you know, my mom went missing for a week, so it wasn't even as long as, you know, your son or brother was missing. But I know that that was absolute torture, and not knowing, needing to know, needing to understand, trying anything desperately to find information was hell. So I have some idea of what you've gone through, and I want so badly for him to be found, some sort of remains to be found. I've even consulted psychics because I thought maybe some information might be helpful, and I'm sure you guys have done things too like that. I know my family did when my mom was missing, so please just know how sorry I am and how sorry we are, our family is. I don't even know who to reach out to. I wasn't even born yet. But if any of you get to see this or watch this, I want you to know how sorry we are. And if there's anything that we could do to help, we are willing. You know I've said things just to see if he would say anything, and he denies it adamantly. He denies having any involvement. He's sort of admitted to other things, like some of the sex crimes, in sort of some ways. Not you know, the way I would need, the way that would be appropriate. But, he hasn't incriminated himself in anything. So I wanted to put this out there for other people who maybe are dealing with what I'm dealing with and what my family is dealing with. And also for any potential victims. And if there's any information, you're welcome to contact to put information out there for me too. Thanks.